Welcome back to the Armchair Attorney podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Leffler, the Armchair Attorney. As always, I'm joined by my wonderful friend, the bust of Apollo somewhat near my chamber door, featuring Dat Hat. You know, DAT, DAT, Dial a Truck. 1978, Dial a Truck has been helping folks, truckers, brokers, and all the others get information and data about freight. Where's the freight on that old load board? What is a load board? Thing attached inside of a truck stop with all the loads on a board. Very literal. I'm so happy that they've been a partner of the podcast now for almost a year. We've almost got a year under our belts. That's pretty exciting. We can toss up some other things here. Look, I'm also, we're brought to you by a floating disembodied head. Ask for it by name. Look, I'm so excited. I've been in this business for the better part of 15 years, and most of what I've done has been in the legal side of things, helping companies navigate complex legal issues, compliance, lawsuits, all that fun stuff. But my passion has always been in safely delivering freight and on time and undamaged. And that's what my family's tradition in this industry has always been about. Dad worked for Roadway back in 1976. My grandpa had his own trucking company, Leffler and Sons. So once you get into this business, you can't get out of it. Even if you think you want to, you probably don't. And one of the things that's so exciting for what I get to do is I travel all across the country and I have a chance to meet interesting entrepreneurs and people in this business who have the same kind of passion for helping people get what they need. And that's no different from my guest who will be joining us in just a second, Tristan Bordallo. He's got the most infectious smile in the business. So I'm very excited to have him join us in just a second. But you got to understand, if it's on your doorstep, if it's on your shelf, it came on a truck. Now, maybe it was on a boat for a little bit. That's fine. Maybe it hopped on a train car for a period of time. But in order for that thing to get to you, it had to go on a truck. And driving a truck is difficult, even under the best circumstances. We see these lawsuits that are popping up everywhere. We understand that rules may be changing, transparency, speed regulations, all this stuff constantly attacking the trucking industry. But yet there are still people who have the desire to help people get what they need. It's essential work. You can't get around it. You have to have it. Now, maybe someday parts will get automated, but as of today, you got to have a human being doing that. And driving a truck is one of the most common jobs in the entire United States. And for high school educated men, it is the most common job. So when I get a chance to talk to someone who's moving freight in this business, it gets me really excited. So without further ado, I'm going to be bringing on my guest, Tristan Bordallo. Tristan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going, guys? What's up, Matt?
It is so good to meet you in person. We met at Broker Carrier Summit. So for those of the folks who are watching and listening, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I just got onto LinkedIn and I've been in trucking for 21 years, LTL brokerage, full truckload brokerage. I own the agency for Covenant Transport for 10 years. And then I decided to go and buy some trucks to really see. I heard you saying earlier, like, why do we keep doing it? I guess I like pain.
Well, when you're in California, the California People's Republic of California, you probably know the California Air Resource Board quite well. They're an interesting group. So what in the world would give you the idea to get into the asset-based trucking business? Like what precipitated that?
Well, I like high carb diets. Just kidding. No, they're definitely tough to run a business here. In the 6 years that I've been in business, I've been audited 3 times. So it's if you guys like regulations, like everyone wants transparency regulations. Well, why don't you start here in California and see what regulations are really about?
Well, that's a great point you bring up on the regulation side. So in the FMCSA, which is the regulatory body for our industry, they require 1 inspection by a mechanic certified a year. In California, it's a bit different. You probably can speak about the BIT program, but BIT is this idea that every single commercial vehicle 4 times a year, every quarter, has to be inspected. So like in California, it is a far more rigorous process to run a trucking company. Isn't that right?
Oh yeah, and it's very expensive. Every 90 days. I mean, we have a schedule that we're doing it with the trailers, and now I lease all my trucks now because I don't ever want to own. So they do all of the work. So I call them every single time I get an audit. I just call them. They give me a whole history of all the. So the trucks are like done, and the trailers are a little easier, but it is expensive because it's about $105 per trailer every
Wow.
3 months, and that's 8 times 8. So yeah, it sucks.
Well, I love one of my favorite things about California people don't know about. Many years ago, California mandated these like skirts on the side of trailers, like they were for aerodynamics and for greenhouse stuff and all that. But if you didn't do it, it was $1,000 a day fine. And so the entire country was like, wait a second, I don't know if my trailer is going to be in California or it's going to be in Texas or it's going to be in Ohio. We got to retrofit the entire fleet. So I imagine your trailers, you have skirts, you have all the bells and whistles.
Oh yeah, we even have the load right or the load weight right, where we have the weights, because we have you here in Cali, they check you for your weight. I mean, I don't think I knew this when I was a broker. Like I'm like, wait a minute, I thought there was only that 80,000 pound rule, right, for the weight. But I was like,
Yeah.
oh shoot, now I got to worry about the drives, the steers, and the trailer. And I was like, dude, this is so crazy. And anytime you move that trailer, it's going to change the weight or the distribution of that weight. But then going back to what you're saying, yeah, it's those skirts, they're not good for protecting when your driver hits those yellow poles. Like it's so expensive.
Oh, I
4 grand,
absolutely.
4 grand when one's
Oh,
like these. And it's funny because I know you're big on Wabash, so I have 7 Wabash trailers, and
okay.
so they're gonna raise the rates on me on these skirts because of this lawsuit. They're just someone's gonna have to pay for it because those things are $4,000 to replace, and I
That
don't
is
think
incredible.
it is ever even like I look at our fuel consumption. It hasn't changed the fuel consumption. Like
That's a really good point. I mean, this is one of these. If I didn't have my Santa hat on, I'd have my tinfoil hat or my aluminum foil hat. I
yeah,
don't believe the side skirts really do a big number on fuel efficiency, but on the repair and maintenance side, if you're a mechanic or a vendor who does repair and maintenance, this is great. This is wonderful. We need more things to bolt onto trailers that get smashed up and destroyed because it's a
yeah.
good way to keep people busy.
And those docks that are kind of angled.
Yeah.
Okay, so the skirts always get jacked as soon as you back, and I'm like, dude. So I can't even, and I don't want to file on insurance. I don't want my insurance to go up. So
No,
I'm
of
like,
course not.
it's just those little rubber things. We don't have to replace them as long as we don't touch the white one. And I don't know what that's called, but it's like it's made of like uh, God, I don't even know what it's made of, but it's pretty thick material. I think it's geez, I don't know. I don't even.
Well, what was after we're done with our conversation? I have some great repair and maintenance vendors in California I could connect you with. They will do much better than $100 on a bit. I think we'd be like half that price. We can get you some really solid providers in the space. But let me ask you this: so you were a broker. So how did you get into the industry of moving freight to begin with? What was your genesis into this industry?
Well, it was back in 2004. So you guys might know Jeremy Thone. We met each other freshman year in high school. So he was my best
Wow.
friend throughout. We were surfing and we were snowboarding, and his dad owned a brokerage out in I think at the time it was at near Torrance.
Okay.
And he just had this LTL brokerage where he used to work for Old Dominion, had those rates. And I was like, dude, that's a cool job. Your dad just doesn't have to wear a suit and a tie. So when we got out of college, I said, let's work for your dad. And we worked there, and I fell in love with it. I mean, I always liked sales. So I always liked the customer facing side of things and solving problems. But in LTL, it was like, dude, it was like selling rates. Like, what's your discount? You know how easy that was?
I love LTL. Like I find this idea of like this hub and spoke method, the incredible investments in equipment. You have the truck, you have the trailer, you have the dolly, you have another trailer, you have switch tractors, you have forklifts, like all this equipment, all this real estate. It is like one of the biggest moats. And you mentioned Old Dominion. I love OD. Nobody can make as much money on freight than them. I mean, they have an operating ratio like 70%. Like it's a different
Yeah, 30.
category.
Yeah, they make 30 cents for every dollar. What meanwhile, Yellow is making $1 and they're paying 3 cents to move freight. And that's and it's funny that you say it because I always go back to my LTL days because I did it for 5 years. I still have LTL tariffs like on my brokerage side.
Absolutely.
So but I always go like, man, these guys command so much. If you don't load them up in 15 minutes, or if no one knows what minimum density rule is or linear foot rule, like they get you for everything. Oh, you gave us 5 pallets. Your max was 4, or hey, you didn't have enough weight on this. They charge you for everything. And I'm like,
Wow.
dude, imagine being able to do that to brokers or shippers on the full truckload side, instead of just taking it up every single place we go to. Like, oh no, you're staying here for a while. Oh, we're only going to give you $150. I'm like, but you can't do that with LTL. They'll go tell you to go pound sand.
This is an industry that if you go in the way back machine, so Yellow started in 1924. I think CF was 1929. Roadway was 1930. I mean, this is before highways, before containerization. It wasn't LTL and truckload. It was just trucking. And the Yellows, the Roadways, they did full truckload. That was the easy part of the business. And they did the LTL side, and that was the challenging part. And after deregulation, all these full truckload companies kind of pop up, but the Yellows of the world remain, and they lasted 99 years. 99 years. I mean, it's crazy to think a company had that strong of a legacy.
Well, I could go back to like 2004. Where I remember sitting in on meetings, and when it was still, Yellow and Roadway were still not, they're both two separate companies. And then you had the USFs, right? So like those were all regional carriers. It was, USF was ran really well. And then when they all joined together, I remember, I don't know, maybe 2007, 2008 is when they really were starting to have trouble, financially. And I go, man, these guys are going to go out of business. And it was pretty surprising that they've lasted this long, because I was thinking, like, how do you operate at a negative for that long?
One of the things people I think kind of forget about Yellow was like, and Roadway to the same extent, these companies had terminals in places you just simply could not build again. Like they had real estate that was so incredibly valuable. So they were doing these deals where they would sell their property, lease it back, and get the cash they needed. And they were able to survive. And even after they went bankrupt, like they're making billions of dollars as they sell off these incredible pieces of property. But you're right. I mean, they were run in a way that didn't make any sense. And they tried, they called it One Yellow. They were going to try to reorganize the business and streamline it. And the Teamsters were like, no, we don't want to do it. And so they didn't. And then they went bankrupt. And now we see the legacy of, the same year that Convoy folds is the same year that Yellow folds. It's like, oh man, there's some synchronicity in these things.
Well, I just think that like having 3 terminals, like a Roadway terminal right next to a Yellow terminal, or a USF terminal, I'm like, dude, they're like 3 miles away from each other. Why wouldn't you optimize it? But I mean, it's crazy because when I look at full truckloads, everyone thinks full truckloads are just one. But if you came from LTL, you would understand that not all LTL companies are the same. Like the reason why Old Dominion and FedEx are killing it, because they have terminals everywhere. And then there's the other guys, right? You have all the dot lines, the front lines. Those are like, yeah, you're gonna F around and find out. You're gonna understand that those guys don't have the insurance, or they're not gonna pay you. They're gonna be late. It's gonna be railed. Like but you have to understand that as a shipper. But now I feel like everyone wants us to be front lines, right?
Yeah. They want one hand to shake, one throat to choke.
Yeah, it's exactly like, I don't know, man. It's like full truckloads. I learned a really tough lesson when the first year I started, from 16 years of brokering both LTL and then full truckloads with Covenant. I learned, I was like, wow, this is how the industry works. Because I was in my own bubble, right? Like, I knew what, like at having an agency, you get to just deal with the customers, and then your carriers that you work with. So you're in this bubble. You're not understanding, like, how did the guys go from 0 to $500 million in revenue? And then when I started to, when I was dispatching these trucks, I'm like, these guys really treat carriers this way, or this is what it's really like. But it's an opportunity. Like, now that I've been doing it for 6 years, I'm like, okay, it's an opportunity for me to go back to my brokerage and really understand how to run a legitimate business that takes care of everyone. And that's why I changed my mission to Care for All, because the guys that want to step up should be able to have access to the great loads that are out there. They shouldn't be lumped in with, the other crazy carriers like Cal Freight, for example. I just saw that. I'm like, give me $328 million, man. I could do whatever I want. Like, And it's called double pledging, right? Like,
Yeah.
did you see
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. We'll get loans here, we'll get loans there, and then we'll go bankrupt. It's a great idea. We'll
Yeah,
have a
with
good time.
one piece of equipment to, we'll get two lenders on it. One won't know that we already have a loan on it, like, but we'll trick them. But I'm like, dude, that's so bad because like it's just horrible for our industry to have
I
guys
think
that
that
are running businesses like that.
with the market as bad as it's been for as long as it's been, we're going to start seeing the really big and consistent bankruptcies over the next few weeks and months. Like there might be a freight recovery. It seems like the cycle has shifted, but we probably won't see big things until Q1 or maybe beginning of Q2 next year for like real recovery. So we're going to see a lot of this stuff happen because like when the sunlight shines, you start to see everything. So what have you learned in the course of like you start this trucking company during probably like almost one of the biggest booms in trucking history, and then you have to endure 2 or 3 years of just brutal rates. How have you survived, and what have you learned so far?
Well, luckily for me, I've had customers for a long time, and I have the
Yeah.
brokerage side, right? So I get to cherry pick the profitable loads. The other thing that really helped me out was dedicated. Like I
Mhm.
started in 2019. Remember, so I got my first truck December 3rd of 2018, three of them.
Okay.
But I had a customer, Cool Pack, that I already knew I was going to be running all three trucks with them. I didn't even own a trailer. I was just going to haul their trailers back and forth from the
Yeah.
five, from Washington to Rancho Cucamonga, Clackamas, Oregon to Rancho, and
Mhm.
Northern Cal, back and forth. That's all I did. And I stuck on, the owners were really awesome. They knew that I didn't know much about trucking, but they really looked out for me. But I
Okay.
didn't go out on the spot market, right? And that 2019, I was so lucky that 2019 I wasn't on the spot market because that was a horrible year too in trucking. So I
Yeah.
didn't even know. But it also bit me in the ass too in 2020 and 2021 and 2022. Like I wasn't making all this money because I was stuck on these contracts.
Hmm.
I didn't go out on the spot market, but it allowed me to grow my business. And that's the one thing that I learned. I go, you know what? I don't need to make a bunch of money here when the times are great. And then I don't need to lose here. I understand that you're not supposed to trade today's money for tomorrow's money.
Yeah.
Like tomorrow's money goes up and down. Like if you could figure out a customer that says, hey, look, I'll take care of you. You're not going to make a lot of money, but you're also not going to die.
That level of consistency, that's one of the, I think, is such an
Yeah.
interesting topic you bring up because in transportation, trucking specifically, we know what the costs are. It's fuel is usually the biggest cost. Labor is number two. The asset, the truck and the trailer, is your third biggest cost. Then you have maintenance, and then you have insurance and tires, and those insurance and tires kind of fight for five and six. But when you have dedicated contracts, you know your operational cost. You know you're not going to make money hand over fist like some of the guys in the spotlight did, but you survive when the market changes. So you build a business that is designed to be resilient as opposed to grab a bunch of money and then get destroyed in the market when it flips. Like that's incredible. Did you know you were doing that when you were doing it, or is it just kind of a lucky happenstance?
It took me a while to figure it out because everyone would say, why are you doing that? Why don't you make money here? And I was like, no, because I've always focused on relationships.
Yeah.
That's just my core, right? It's always been relationships because I understand that. Like everyone talks about, let's talk about churn. Forget revenue. Like let's
Yeah.
talk about how long you've kept that customer. And it's been my turn for a long time with certain customers, but that's how I run my business because I don't want to be the next. I want to sleep at night. I want to take care of
Yeah.
the carriers. I want to take care of my customer. And it takes me so long. I know how hard it is because I used to pound those calls, right? All day,
Mhm.
every day. So I know how long it takes to get a customer. It would take months or years. So like, I know that the guys that I set out to serve, I'll actually eventually underserve them if I cut corners.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
right.
why I stuck with Cool Pack. Like I said, you know what? I'm going to stick to this. And then I was able to buy 7 trailers. Like I was like, oh wow, that's so cool. I made so much money that my accountant said, you need to spend money. And I'm like, oh, well, I've always wanted trailers, right? My own trailers. Because I did buy 2 Celadon trailers when Celadon went out of business. So that was
Yeah.
pretty cool, right? Like, but I was able to turn around and sell those during the hot time, prices where when they were,
Absolutely.
I bought those things for 30 grand. I sold them for 70. And I was like, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And and
That's
I and
crazy.
and it was my chance to get rid of a Freightliner that I had. Get this, I bought it for $138,000. I sold it for $135,000 with 430,000 miles.
That's madness.
It
I mean,
is. I'm going to start leasing everything. I don't want to own these trucks because it's horrible. Like owning trucks in California with all the sensors and the one box and the defs,
yeah.
dude, if it goes down for just one little sensor, it could take 2 to 3 weeks to a month to get back on the road. That's like a heart attack to your cash flow. You know,
Absolutely. I think that's a great point you bring up, because if you're in the business of hauling freight and you lose the one source of revenue that you have, because people can have extra trailers, you can have a ratio of more trailers to trucks, but you don't have trucks just sitting idle waiting. So if you have a truck you own and then you need to get one because it's in the shop, you're renting one. So you have two truck payments. So
yep.
when you're leasing, are you like the Ryder, the Penske, the National Lease? Are you looking for local partners?
Well, I do. So I lease with Tech and
Okay.
Velocity.
I love those guys.
So yeah, they've been great partners, and I got equipment when no one else was getting them. So I've built up a really good relationship with them over there. But it's cool, like when you break down, you get to run. Like within 24 to 48 hours, you're back on the road. Before this was one of the worst stories. I had a one box. It took 2 months. Like do you know that? Remember that show where the guy was playing? I mean, a movie where he's playing the drums, waiting for the biggest short, the short something
Yeah.
short when he was shorting the housing industry, and he was
Yeah.
waiting to actually do it. That's how I felt for like 2 months, going, "Oh my god, dude! Like I've been paying, and I got to pay 30 grand for this one box." It's scary, man. When you own your own truck, that's why I said, I will never. That pain taught me to never own a truck ever again.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go lease and just find the customers that support that model.
It makes a lot of sense. The big motor carriers like an OD or Pitt, Ohio, those guys and gals, they'll own that truck. But the minute the warranty expires, they're done. They get rid of it. They get rid of it. So
Oh
the
yeah.
idea is like, why would you own something if it has all these sensors, all these things? If you don't need to do that to run your business, better to borrow that. But now trailers are different. Trailers are something you can have, you can maintain, you can own that. So what made you go, okay, it's time for me to have one of those beautiful boxes with those swing doors? Or do you run roll-up doors?
No, they're swing doors. So
There
I
you
bought
go.
my first one was a Stoughton that I bought, but that was bought in like 2019 just to have one, so I could feel like it was only 30,000. And then I bought, in the height of it in 2022, I bought 7.
Oh
And
my goodness.
I wanted the cool looking trailers. And I said, man, this is so awesome, because now I feel like a real trucking company.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then so the reason why I just bought it was because, I wanted to invest in something that I realized that it's almost like real estate. They don't go down in value so much. And then once they're paid off, they're going to be paid off in 14 months.
Absolutely.
So, which I'm stoked, because I'm like, yes, finally I could breathe. But what it does for me though, is I get to put my name on it. Like that's what I dreamed of. And that's why when I bought this thing, I mean, when I started this whole idea of having my own trucks, and why I left Covenant, is because I built it for 10 years. I was just like a McDonald's. I'll never own McDonald's, but it's a franchise.
Yeah.
I wanted legacy. I turned 40 in 2018. So I said, you know what? I want legacy. It's so cool to see my trucks. I still have to pinch myself. Like when I'm driving, because I drive on the 5 and the 210 where my trucks go. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a clean looking truck. And then it's one of mine. And I'm like, wait, what? It still blows my mind.
That's awesome. That's so cool. For me, the most important asset in the supply chain is the trailer. I think you look at who invests in trailers, and you have Amazon with their middle mile, and they have 40,000 maybe trailers. You have FedEx Ground. They don't own the power units. That's all independent contractors, but they own those trailers. And so whenever someone gets excited about those boxes, I'm like, that's exactly the right mentality, because that is where all the stuff is. Like drivers are important, trucks are important, but trailers, that's what moves freight. And that's what gets me really jazzed. So with your brokerage, like, do you still run the brokerage today?
I mean, they're here. I mean, so I have some brokers that I've had for a long time that work here. So basically it's just a place for us to like put our customers through but now I'm coming back to it, because I'm like, guys, I am born again. I've learned something. Like, we're not supposed to put all this money on detention, right? If we're going to get let's be real about it, because we have to make sure that these great carriers stay in business. Yeah. So let's help them as much as we can. And that's where I'm coming from, with a new lens. Oh, shoot. It doesn't cost $150 for a layover. Why we should get 250 or 300 for this. Because I read all the tariff 100s, Covenant had one, and I'm like, we should be copying this and figuring out a way to work with our, carriers to help them, because we want them to stay in business. Like how Coolpack took care of me. I want to do the same thing for a lot of the carriers. And we're not even on DAT anymore. We're just working with the carriers that we have.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Cause why not? I mean, they could, and we approach it differently. We're not going to go after a customer that I can't handle all their, capacity requirements. I'm going to go somewhere that says, hey, look, this is what we have. These are the carriers that we have. So we just totally flipped it around and just said, okay, this is what carriers we have. Let's look for freight to help them.
Interesting.
So, that's LTL though. Like that's how we did it at LTL, right? Hey, we need freight moving here. Okay, cool.
How do we balance the network?
Yeah, let's balance it out. Like, because everyone else is racing to zero, and like I'm just going to do what everyone's not doing.
Well, I love that mentality, because as I look at this, like we are seeing freight move at below the operational cost of a truck. Now, maybe those truckers have purchased and they've paid off their vehicles, but still, like if you look at the national out of service rate, 21.6% last I checked. I mean, it's staggering how like under maintained a vehicle is. So when you're focusing on the trucker and saying, okay, how can I make their life better? Presumably that gives them some less of this churn that is so rampant in the business, and this they call carrier reuse rate. So if you reuse the carrier, then you're actually building a relationship, and you're the partner that we want to see. There's so much activity right now about transparency. The idea that a broker should have to disclose to a motor carrier what the shipper paid them. There's contracts, there's regulation. Have you followed this issue? Is this one you pay attention to?
Oh yeah, well, I was just on a panel yesterday with BCS. Dan Lindsay.
Adam, awesome.
Double Jamies, and Steve Talamo. So like, what I'm neutral about it, right? Because I don't think it's going to solve any issues for like. And I'm going to go back to what you were saying about this 21% safety.
Yeah.
Like that's just based on the 10% that's actually being checked. The 90%, imagine all the shitty ass carriers because I just drove from Houston. I'm like, dude, if they could run this, I'm like, I should have two companies. It's just be called FAFO. F around, find out. They're not, if I could go through and run 9 out of 10 companies and not even be checked for safety, and that's exactly what everyone's doing. They have 10 MCs, right? Like they're burning. Like that's what sucks about this whole thing, because we're not helping the industry at all by not understanding the costs of running a trucking company.
I think that's a really good point. Like what I feel like has happened is people have become addicted to fast and cheap transportation. Yeah. And it's been the case since I think deregulation 1980. That's when this trend happened. I use these examples. So we talk about out of service rates, one example. The other one is like minimum insurance for motor carriers for hauling freight interstate. That number is $750,000. It's a lot of money. That number was established in 1980, never adjusted for inflation, never increased, never modified. There's been attempts. And so as you look at it, you're like, oh, so you're telling me 1 in 5 vehicles, if I just went and looked at it, it would not be safe at all. Would not be able to be on the road to move anything. And we also have this massive amount of underinsurance. It's this crazy situation where we damage ourselves. Like we're our own worst enemies in this business.
Well, and also like talk about enforcement. Like who's going to enforce that? Okay, it's passed. Okay, like if they can't even enforce safety, which is more important than transparency.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know. Like, what are we distracting ourselves from what's really the problem, which is the safety issue? And I talk about the responsibility because I had no idea how much responsibility that I have now. And I'm like, dude, do I really want to continue this?
Absolutely.
And when I listen to, the WWD, Wabash, Werner, Daimler, I'd be scared to be any kind of, trucking company. And autonomous, imagine autonomous. Like if you're trying autonomy right now, like, okay, Wabash was just sitting there chilling with 2 guys drunk with no seatbelts going faster than they should. And they hit some trailer that's there chilling. What makes you think you could run around with no driver in a truck?
This is, that's a really good point. So for the folks who are listening that don't know the Wabash case, Exactly. So what happened was, you're exactly right. So this truck and trailer are owned by GDS Express. They're stopped. That vehicle, passenger vehicle, smashes the back of that trailer at about 55 miles an hour, goes underneath the trailer, has what they call an underride when the ICC bumper or the rear impact guard fails and you go underneath the trailer. And both these gentlemen die. And then Wabash gets sued. So GDS Express goes bankrupt. They're gone. And they sue Wabash, and it's $462 million is what is given against Wabash and in behalf of these two people. And there is not a single trailer that I'm aware of in this country that's ever been tested at 55 mile an hour for a rear impact. So you could have realistically 4.7, 4.8 million trailers that are defective if that case remains the law of the land lease for Missouri. It's bananas. It is crazy. It's crazy. I'm encouraged by the robots, though, Tristan. I am, because my belief, and I could be wrong, is that if you have autonomous trucks, you can't have an out of service rate that's below 1%. Like, it has got to be a number that's like 99.5% safe, equipped, everything's working properly, almost like an airline, versus what we have in the trucking industry, which is, it seems okay. Run it. You should go see what happens. We'll be fine.
No, it's
what
funny
do you think about the robots?
The robots. I mean, I'm around them now. You know, I've been on the Waymos here in LA. They run around. So I did it for research. They actually drive a lot better than, you know, they actually follow the lanes, and they don't make all these abrupt moves. And so they're really, I feel safe in them. But I was just wondering, like, that might be a good idea to just put us all out of business because we don't know how to run a safe trucking company. Like, let's just be a vending machine, and then everything else will have nutritional facts, right? Like, okay, this truck can only go this far.
I'm going to pull that thread, because I think you're actually right with how you've described this. So for many people who don't realize this, in California, there have been two bills that I'm aware of that have tried to mandate a human being in driverless trucks. OIDA pushed for one, Teamsters pushed for one, and Newsom, the governor, has twice now vetoed a bill that would require a human in the truck. So it is very clear, at least from the regulatory standpoint, that driverless trucks are a question of when, not a question of if. Yep. And this is why I get so interested with trailers. So we might see the future as certain lanes run by robots back and forth, but it then becomes a function of whose trailer is the robot pulling. And it might be the case that there are these massive pools of trailers that people like you could contribute into, or you could basically put your stuff into these loops of stuff moving back and forth. So I love the idea of the autonomous truck, and I love the idea of the connected trailer. So if you have a robot pulling freight, well, that trailer has to be talking too. So I love the when these things intersect, when you have this new technology with that beautiful 53-foot box with swing doors.
Well, let's talk about electrification first, right? Like,
okay, let's do that.
Okay, like because I'm thinking about it in like how expensive these robots would be. Because I heard Waymo was like $300,000 for that.
Oh yeah,
for that Jaguar and all the cool things on it. But I can't imagine if trailers are $40,000 to $50,000, and that's just for a dry box. Mm-hmm. How expensive would it be to make that autonomous? And then you also have, you know, the truck, how much that's going to be. Because when you go to electric or hydrogen, those trucks are $650,000. And if you're in California, you get to get a voucher, but you still have to pay taxes, sales tax on what's left, or like for the whole amount. So if it's $650,000 at 10%, that's $65,000 in taxes. And then you have to pay, they only give you $550. So you got to pay $165,000, which is the same as a diesel, but you only get 200 miles. So, and imagine going to a customer and saying, hey, I know you love putting, you know, a lot of weight in your you know, and from overseas, but you got to do 6,000 or 8,000 pounds less.
Exactly.
Because I have electric trucks and we have rules because it's heavier, and I have to charge you 2 to 3 times more. Will you support my business? Like, who's going to support the business when it's autonomy, right? Like if there's so much autonomy going on, like who's going to support those autonomous trucks, autonomous trailers, and no human in it? So it's like, that's a lot to ask for a customer to have to support.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the electrification idea is something that I think is it's smoke and mirrors. Maybe call it greenwashing, because you raised some great points. They are way more heavy. They're way heavier than a normal diesel motor, 8,000 pounds heavier. That's freight you don't get to pull. They are manifestly more expensive. You mentioned that too, 2 or 3 times the cost of a diesel motor. But the other part of it is, what's the residual value? Like, what do you get to sell that truck for when you're done? That question is something that no one can answer, because no one knows what the residual of these trucks are. The technology changes so quickly. Maybe you buy it and you can't sell it when after you're done with it. So I fundamentally believe robots happen before we see electrification. The other challenge with electrification, I think, is the grids aren't able to support it. So people are like, let's put some plugs in here. It's like millions of dollars for 10 chargers. Like, oh, that's not a great investment. I can't make that make sense. But robots, here's where I think the difference is, Tristan. I think you talk to somebody in the autonomous space, and it's about cost reduction. Now, they'll say safety. They all talk about safety, but look at Outrider. So Outrider is an autonomous spotting company, makes spotting trucks, yard hustlers. And I believe that those outfitted kits are probably going to be anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a month. So it's going to be expensive, but it's cheaper than a human being. And if it shows to be safer, I think that door opens and it never closes. Like, I am one of these people. I probably will be wrong over time. Maybe. I don't think so. I think you're going to see autonomous creep in, and then it's going to be everywhere, ubiquitous. And it'll be so cheap compared to the human being version that you wouldn't go back. I could be wrong, but that's what I think about. But I love those two, like, as you compare them, electrification versus automation. It's fascinating.
Well, because you got to go back to who's actually going to support it, right? If the customer says, okay, I will support that, then it's game on.
Yeah, exactly.
If they're willing to pay. And the funny thing about, one of the things that have come up is that, and I joke about it, why all of a sudden did our bridges just get stronger? Because now if you have a Tesla, it's 82,000 pounds, not 80. I'm like, wow, you just solved the bridge problem, right? Now you're at 82,000 pounds. The bridge got stronger at 2,000 pounds stronger because you're riding around in electric. Like, that's just, it's all this crazy stuff that I always go like, okay, we got to make sure that there's a customer first that's willing to pay for all of that cost.
Absolutely. I think, like, the other problem with electrification is, if you have a battery fire, most municipalities have no resources to deal with that. Like, a battery fire in an electric car, let alone a truck, is just different. Like, they usually let it burn out. It takes orders of magnitude more to put it out if you use just water. So I think there's that challenge. Now we talk about automation. Like, we are about to see in less than a month something really interesting happen in the supply chain. That's the ILA, the International Longshoremen's Association. There's a version of them on the West Coast, but there's also one on the East Coast. This is so cool. So they struck earlier in 2024. They struck for 3 days, and they were able to get a 62% wage increase over like a 6-year period, but they couldn't come to terms with automation. And so they ended up punting that until January 15th, 2025. Have you been following this story? You've been thinking about, like, oh, what does this mean for transportation?
Yeah, because it was funny. Like, the money, it wasn't all about the money. They got rid of that in like, what, 2-3 days. And then
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, I still need proof of concept for automation to work. I know that it is, that's where they're, and plus I don't know the politics side of it,
Yeah.
right? Like, I have no idea who owns those terminals, and it could be international. There's a lot of geopolitical things that are probably involved. But the other thing that there's gonna be a lot of pissed off people, man, if you're gonna replace them. I mean, that's why I'm really careful about talking about replacing, because I don't want it to be a vending machine. I mean, I still love the human connection to it, but I guess if those guys they can't unload 50 because they're 50 containers in an hour or whatever their KPIs are, and a robot can do 100, like, yeah, don't you think that'll be more efficient for the I don't know, maybe not for the economy, but for the people who are waiting for those containers, instead of always being so rigid about, okay, like, because I remember Yellow. I used to call Yellow and go, hey man, can you unload this thing? And because if it's union, they're like, oh no, we have to take a break.
Yeah, we're not allowed to do that. That's someone else's job. We have a very clear.
We're not doing that. And so I always go, dude, if you just did your job, you wouldn't be replaced by a robot.
It's interesting. Like, I'm with you. Like the thing I think about with automation is like I know the technology is either here now or it's nearly here. The challenge I have is the scary thing we talk about in America is the Teamsters could stop everything, and before 1980 they certainly could. Yellow, Roadway, and CF, if they all struck, America stops moving before 1980. But if the longshoremen strike, you could stop the entire East Coast port, the entire Gulf port, except for maybe Savannah. But what about a hostile foreign power that hacks into the systems, like the cybersecurity risk? And that's the part that I get concerned because I have to assume the worst in everything that I do because that's just the nature of my my generalized anxiety and my law background is like I think about only the worst thing. And I think, well, if you automate this and then you have it not secure, we have the exact same problems. Unless you have assurances, you can make it so it can't be hacked or damaged. I don't want to see automation. I would prefer not to have that. But I understand why the longshoremen fight. I mean, they have no choice. This is the fight that they have to fight. They fought containerization. They lost that fight, but they had to fight it. They had no choice. So it'll be interesting to see how 2025 shapes up because that's going to be one of the most interesting things to happen in this business.
Yeah, I mean, automation is definitely coming, and it's one of those things that how do you fit people into that economy or that ecosystem where we could still live and have a job. So that's a hard balance, and I'm so glad I don't have to worry about that.
Well, let's back to you. So what are you most excited about for 2025? Because you have a couple different companies. Like, what all are you working on coming for the next year?
Well, I'm going to start. I want to get into helping the carriers and helping them really get in front of profitable loads. Mm-hmm. And sharing, there's a lot of inequality, and that's what deregulation does, right? Inequality, fraud, and I really want to help carriers get in front of the profitable loads by giving them the education, the tools, the data. I mean, they're the underserved, right? Like now that I figured out, okay, this is so freaking hard. The responsibility is insane. The risk, the liabilities is insane. Why can't I just share some of the money that I'm making as a broker with them? And we can have a better ecosystem. And I don't care. I don't want to be the biggest broker, but if I could help 100 companies, small companies like myself, that's times 10 or 20 trucks. I have a 2,000 truck fleet that I could put in front of shippers and say, look, we're all safe. We all want to run a business. Like we all want to run a safe business. We all want to be around for tomorrow. We want to service the heck out of you. That's what I want, because I'm sick and tired of, even when one of the reasons why to it is I told myself, why can't I find the carriers that just want to do a great job? But it's so hard because now I know, because it's so hard to run a trucking company, to do it safely, to the expenses. Like I want to make sure that I could, like me figuring this out for them, I care more about them than they care about themselves, because they don't know how.
That's right? Interesting. It's never been easy moving freight. It's never been an easy thing to deal with. What are you bringing to the table to these motor carriers that can help them differentiate their businesses and become more productive?
Like, for me, it's giving them the tools, like access to the, profitable loads. I'm going to volunteer, say, look, hey, if we could get this customer, they're paying this much. Let's figure out a way to get there. Let's join together in a captive, like insurance, buy fuel together.
There you go. Okay, that makes sense.
Be on Samsara, have standardization for like a community. That's really what I'm trying to build. And that's why I'm on LinkedIn trying to figure out, okay, are there people that think like me? And I'm so glad there's a lot, like meeting guys like you that are really about the carriers. Because if I just get stuck in looking at why are these guys being treated this way, then I'm just angry. So I wanted to learn about, that side that I didn't know, which is the carrier side.
Yeah, absolutely. You've driven a mile in their shoes and their steer tires and their drive tires. Absolutely.
It made me born again, man. Like the born again broker that knows what the heck needs to be solved, because they can't do it. They're not going to be like, they don't have the money. They don't have the organization to get it, to get in front of these awesome RFPs that I've been a part of.
Mhm.
And I sit there and I go, wow, I can't even handle some of this. But if I could gather up the troops and say, hey, look, you want to go after this with me?
How big is the brokerage? How many people are inside your brokerage at this moment?
Oh, we have 8 people in our
That's
brokerage.
awesome. That's so
Yes,
cool.
yeah, that's all it is. It's just us guys, and we're old school. Like a lot of the guys that are they're like 10, 12 years older than me. We just want a place to put our customers, and we're very small. It's a boutique style.
That's great. Where'd you get the name iamfr8? I love that name for your trucking company. Where did that name come from?
I used to, I used to be a DJ. So there was I remember DJ AM. He had a Lamborghini and says, I am AM, right? Like I was like, I am. So I was like, I am freight, a place for drivers. And then I just borrowed that 8 and used it for Freightopia. So it's like the perfect world for freight. So
that's awesome. And Freightopia is your brokerage. Is that right?
Yeah.
How long has the brokerage been in business at this point?
6 years.
Good for you.
So it's a funny story. So when I left Covenant, I had to do a 1-year non-compete.
Don't you love those? Aren't they great?
Yeah. So yeah, but it wasn't because of Covenant. It was because of my business partner then.
I see.
He did not want to run a trucking company. So, and one of the things with Covenants, you're not supposed to haul any alcohol. And funny thing was, I was like, all right, well, in my brokerage, I'm just going to go out, call alcohol, accounts. And I landed a big wine account. So I was like, all right, cool. So I went from like 0 revenue to like 600,000. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's only me. And I'm still learning this side. I only had 3 trucks and I was trying to figure it all out. So
that's incredible. But
it's just, I like to hustle. That's what I still love to do. That's why I still go out and visit customers. Like that's fun for me. And if I can't do that off a vending machine, like, when I see all these click away type, I'm like, that's not even a relationship. You're just selling rates at that point. You could do that with LTL, right? Like we see that freightquotes.com. You just type in zip to zip and then boom. But
at what point in your career did you realize that you could never get out of supply chain? Have you realized that yet? Or is it something you haven't quite dawned on you at this moment?
I actually don't even think about it. I mean, I think about on the carrier side, like, of course, because there's so much like after seeing all these lawsuits and the responsibilities, sometimes I go, do I really need to go? And because the dream was to go to 100 trucks or 200. And I was like, oh, dude, after seeing what
I don't want to do that. Yeah.
I don't think I want to do that. But what I could do is I want to help guys that have that appetite to go to 20, 30, 40, 50 and doing it right too. But like, I don't know. I just love, I just love sales and I love this part of the business where like, I love my customers. Like I have this whole weekend. I have 3 dinners, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then lunch with customers. Like that's awesome, man. Like that's the best part about this business. And I don't think people do it enough when you're just cold calling on the phone. Like that's a different type of, that's the hyper growth type. I want relationships. Like I really focus on relationships.
Well, that's one thing I noticed. You attend a lot of these industry events. Like what do you find most useful in these events, and which ones are you going to be thinking about going to next year?
Well, BCS was the first one, honestly. Like
really,
yeah. Like I never go. I go to trade shows.
Okay,
right. Like, but I just never thought. Like I'm just different. Like I didn't think you could go and meet with people that were like industry. Like I just thought it was just a place to hang out and party where I should be hanging out with my customers.
I see.
But what I started like 2 years ago, I'm part of Entrepreneurs Organization and it's about networking. And so that's why I said, okay, I saw it with a different lens. Maybe I could find the guys that think just like me, and then we could bounce ideas off of each other. And that's where I was like, okay, I'm going to go to BCS. Okay. So right now, I want to do BCS next year, of course.
That's Indianapolis is the next one, I believe.
And then I want to do Manifest because I'm really interested in the tech side. So, but
that's a drive for you. That's in Vegas. So that shouldn't be a terrible commute.
Oh, I love Vegas. I'm going just because of that. I'm staying 4 days.
Oh man, that's fantastic. Well, for people who want to find more about what you're up to, where can they find more about you and your company?
I'm just on LinkedIn. And we're redoing our websites, iamfr8.com and Freightopia. I haven't done anything since 2019, 20 on them. So I'm revamping everything. I'm
Good for you.
doing this whole marketing thing now. So
that's what we got to do. Well, I will make sure to put those links in the show notes of the podcast. As we get ready for the new year, is there anything concerning you or things that you're really excited about for what you're going to be looking at coming up?
Yeah, for me, I just want to get together with, learn the tech side of this business. I feel like I've been on the hardware side doing all the
Yeah, the asset based, absolutely.
like hard stuff, right? And now I'm like, okay, how can I make this easier? So, talking with a lot of tech, tech forward thinkers and seeing what they can help me with. So if you're out there listening, I'm looking for a technical co-founder.
There you go. Oh, that's awesome, man. I love that. Well, Tristan, it has been a pleasure getting a chance to talk with you today. I love the journey you've outlined for us from going from the brokerage world to getting in the truck. Do you still have a CDL? Because you were driving trucks. I've seen videos of you driving trucks.
I don't have a CDL. That was a 20-foot or 22 feet truck that we were driving for a special friend of ours who's a magician. Trent Watson. Go check him out. He's on America's Got Talent. He'll blow your mind.
Oh, that's fantastic, man. Well, I appreciate you for coming by. I hope you have a great rest of 2024. Hope 2025 is amazing for you. But any closing thoughts before we wrap up for today?
No, just do good for the industries, for a better tomorrow.
That's what we call hope for, man. Well, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, y'all.
Take care, Tristan. Great to have you on the program. Tristan Bordalo. He's a pretty cool guy. He seems to want to help this industry get better. And I think we can all benefit from that. Look, the reality is safely delivering freight on time and undamaged is difficult even under the best circumstances. Operating a truck as a truck driver is one of the most dangerous jobs in America. Number 8 most dangerous job in America. And yet, there aren't enough safe and affordable parking spots for truckers. There's a lot we can do to make the world of trucking better. And people like Tristan are making those efforts every single day. So as always, thank you for joining the podcast. I hope you find this useful, interesting, and please check out our guest. Tristan seems like a phenomenal guy. Loved the conversation. And we'll catch you next time, probably in 2025, maybe. I have no idea. Lots of stuff happening. Have a great rest of your day.